Welcome back to The Pitch, an Ashland University Women's Soccer Coaches Show. I'm Cade Crackister alongside Head Coach Caleb Polino. Coach, appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on here. This is episode 4, so we've gotten through a lot of the year so far. We're not quite to the middle way point yet, but approaching there just around the bend. Your thoughts on this first start of the year?
Yeah, I think, the beginning of the year was a lot of growth for us in managing a new roster, losing a lot of players, figuring out what our identity was. And I think, the last few weeks we've started to really buy into each other and understand what it is to be one of the best teams in the country and have that expectation and standard daily. So I think we've managed it really well. We're obviously rolling with some wins recently and some shutouts as well, so we're hopefully keep it going this week.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on how this past week went with you guys being on the road for 2?
Yeah, it's always difficult to play road conference games. It just provides a different experience, a different level of focus that you need to be on the road and difficult environments. And we had to travel on Friday to get to Saturday's game, so that's always a different experience for our group too, to be in the hotel, to mentally, to kind of switch things over and be prepared for the game. So I thought we handled it really well. We got the results that we needed. We kept clean sheets. We won 3 out of 4 halves. So things that were on our checklist to do this week, I thought we hit a lot of those benchmarks.
Yeah, and I'm curious about this because Coach Roberts brought it up in our coaches show from this week, but kind of the little things with traveling. Players waking up on time for breakfast, getting around to things, getting a good night's sleep. Is that something you're trying to deal with right now?
Yeah, I think for us, the hardest part was the transition and time change.
Yeah.
So, I think the group has a routine, or they at least built a routine when we were over in Michigan in the beginning of the year. So things are starting to become more familiar for them. Being on the road is becoming more familiar. So the things that they've kind of experienced for the first time at the beginning of the year when everything wasn't kind of set in stone, now they're starting to get into a routine. I think that helps as the longer you go throughout the season.
Yeah, are you glad you're able to schedule that for non-conference, that in conference play doesn't affect them at all, really?
Yeah, it's intentional. We want to make sure that, our first experience isn't on the road in the conference play. So regardless, for us, we want to create that environment where, one, we can get away from campus and start building a culture. I think that was one thing that we talked about, in previous episodes, is that experience and how well that helped us moving forward. And I think for us, we're always finding ways to kind of fill in the time with some team building stuff. So I think that's always fun for the group.
Yeah, and you take a look at some individual performances. Any players that stood out for you this past week?
Yeah, I think, Tessa and Emily Mendrick have gotten on the score sheet the last couple games. That's been huge for us. And, I think Danny is still continuing to contribute for us and create dangerous chances. So, I thought the back line handled it really well, especially in environments that are a little bit different than playing in Ferguson Field. And I think that Jaya did a really good job of managing the game for us and coming big in big moments when needed. So I thought for us, as a collective, we did really well. We handled a different experience of a conference road opponent rather than being at home.
Yeah, have you had any weird expectations to manage with your team? I know a lot of your girls are young, but going from scoring 14 goals the week prior to obviously still great performances, but not 14 goals. Is that something you guys have had to work through?
I think, it's probably a bit frustrating for them. I think that when you score the first 2 games in the conference play and scored 7 each, you kind of have the expectation. But I think we generated a lot of chances, and hats off to the teams that we played last week with ODU and Kentucky Wesleyan. They made things difficult, and as expected, when you get more film on opponents and you're in conference play, you're going to know a lot about each other. So I think that's the thing that we got to really focus on, is getting better and doing things a little bit differently in order to create more chances.
Yeah, and we talk about the goalkeeper play, and honestly that entire back line has just been exceptional year in, year out, even for the past 5 years now. But the funny thing is you guys have had goalkeeper turnover, back line changing every year. How do you make sure that, they continue to stay that same standard year in and year out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from our front players and setting the tone defensively and making their job easier. I think, when they're not having as many interactions because our front players and our midfielders are doing a ton of work in front of them, they're really good at managing the game in the back four. So I think, opportunities where, in maybe some other programs, they make a mistake and they get exposed for it. Our group is really managing moments and understanding, hey, we're the last line of defense. They've done a really good job of making things easier for us up front and in the midfield. But we got to make sure that we're focused and not, taking plays off just because we hasn't experienced as much, adversity, having to defend as a lot of times.
Yeah, and earlier in the season, I think it was the first or second episode, we talked about vocality in the locker room and on the field. And, you talked a little about how it's getting a little quiet, people trying to find their roles still.
Yeah.
At this point in the year, who's that vocal leader?
Yeah, I think, Danny stepped up in that role. Clara obviously has been a big influence for us. Addie Turnbull's not playing, but she's providing, opportunity to lead. And, like the Ella Schneiders have been out for us, last few weeks. Sydney Thomas has been out. So I've really appreciated the players that have been out with injury that have been big time contributors for us to not take a step back just because they're not playing. I think they're creating impact in our program, even though they're not physically on the field, but they're asking the same type of demand of the players and expectation from each other. And even the bench, I think, has been unbelievably loud this year. So I think they're taking upon themselves to create impact in different ways.
Yeah, and now moving forward and looking at the future in the coming weeks, coming days, who do you guys have this week?
Yeah, for us, I think the level gets a bit different. We're on the road at Thomas More in Kentucky again for a late evening game, and then we host Malone, so we're excited to be back in conference play at home. And then the schedule gets really, really difficult. You're playing some of the top end teams in our conference, and that expectation and that standard needs to be just as high for the other games as well. But we know we're going to get tested. I think we've done a lot in the last few weeks to really fine-tune things that we got to get better at. Hopefully we'll see the successes pay off when the opponents are now getting more difficult.
Yeah, it'll be 3 road games before you guys are back at home. How nice is it going to be back at home at Ferguson Field on Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Like, the environment here is just different. I think, the comfortability in our players and, the positivity and the influence that they have with each other is always different when you're at Ferguson. Like, there's the routine that's set. You know what to expect. You know where you're going to sit. You know where you're going to stand. You know what the field feels like. Like, no guessing anymore. It's, getting back to Ferguson has always been a special place for us here, and we're excited about that.
Perfect, Coach. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have any more information that you might need about the Ashland University women's soccer team, head over to goashlandeagles.com. You can find the coaches page, roster, statistics, schedule, you name it, you can find it. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much for tuning into The Pitch right here on the Eagle Network.